When it comes to cartoons, my childhood was awesome. I grew up during the golden days of both Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network. Rugrats, Powerpuff Girls, Dexter's Lab, Hey Arnold. There was a broad range of variety, but the one show that stood out to me and was my personal favorite was Samurai Jack. This cartoon takes the fantasy genre and combines it with science fiction. Where else can you see a samurai fight alongside a Spartan as they battle against robotic warriors? Nowhere, I tell ya, because this show is truly unique and is unlike anything else. The creator, Gendy Tadakaskus, I can never say his name right, wanted to make an action cartoon that is cinematic in scope, but also fun and full of action. A show with characters that are both epic and hilarious. The show was canceled in 2004 and left the audience on a cliffhanger. I honestly thought we would never find out what happened to Jack, but lo and behold, the 5th and final season will be coming out in March of 2017. Considering the date of this upload, that's like very soon, and I'm super pumped. Also, the show is being aired for Adult Swim, so it can be more graphic this time around. Due to my excitement, I rewatched the entire series and decided to pick my top 10 Samurai Jack episodes. Now, of course, the picks for this list are all subjective, and they will also be full of spoilers, so keep that in mind before watching this video. On that note, let's jump into it.
Jump good.
Number 10. Jack and the Spartans. Remember how I mentioned the Spartans and the samurai? In this episode, Jack runs into a bunch of Spartans who are desperately trying to hold off an invading army. For decades, these robots would attack the Spartan city, but they held their ground. Jack decides to join the battle and help them defeat these machines once and for all. Now, I know a lot of you might be thinking that this episode was inspired by the movie 300. That isn't true since this came out before the movie, but it was inspired by 300, the comic book series. You can totally see similarities in art style, silhouettes, and color. The comic 300 was created by Frank Miller, a man that Gendy truly admires, and I don't just say that because of the Spartan episode. Ever heard of Ronin? It was a comic that Frank made back in the 1980s. It's about a fallen samurai fighting a demon and how the samurai ends up in a dystopian future. Sounds familiar, right? Alright, back to the Spartans. They have rocket spears, which doesn't really make sense, but you know what? Who cares? It looks badass. We don't get to see warriors from different time periods fight alongside each other often, but that is something Samurai Jack excels at. The show constantly mixes different warriors from different eras with one another, and this episode is the best of them all. Spartan formations clashing with their shields and spears as a lone samurai battles alongside them. I love the visuals, I love the action, I love this episode. Number 9. Birth of Evil. Now, this is actually a 2-part episode, but I'm gonna count it as one. I am a sucker when it comes to lore and history episodes, and this one goes all the way back to the beginning. I mean, we are talking about the old gods chasing down Aku and trying to wipe him out from the universe. Unfortunately, he escapes, hides on Earth, and grows in power. Aku eventually attacks Samurai Jack's family and kingdom. His father, the Emperor, rides into battle but fails. He and his army are not strong enough to stop Aku, and the entire city burns. Things look bad, but the gods of old reach out to the Emperor and bless him with a holy sword that can defeat Aku. He goes back for round 2 and wins the fight. Aku is imprisoned and the city is saved. Number 8. Jack versus the Mungo. Jack is no stranger to fighting monsters, robots, and bounty hunters, but every so often, he faces something new. Mungo is a servant of Aku and has quite the unique ability. He can capture the essence of warriors and can send them into battle. Basically, it's Pokemon, but without the 10-year-olds. Jack is incredibly powerful, but he finds out quickly that hacking and slashing isn't going to save him this time. Mungo basically has an infinite army to call on. I appreciate episodes where Jack has to figure out how to bring down an enemy. He might be outnumbered or overpowered, but that does not necessarily mean that the situation is hopeless. Jack eventually discovers Mungo's weakness and frees the enslaved warriors. He gets his ass kicked and begs for Aku's forgiveness. No. Number 7. Jack and the Ultrabots. Remember how I said that I like episodes where Jack isn't invincible? Well, here you go. Jack gets his ass absolutely kicked in the first part of this one. These Ultrabots are super high tech and are infused with the power of Aku. Also, they look totally awesome. I mean, yeah, they might look like wicker baskets, but they are cool wicker baskets. Each one has a unique ability. Altogether, they are too much for Jack to handle. He then gets some help from the scientist who made the robots. With his new robo-arm, Jack is finally able to cut through the bots. This episode has incredible action, but the main thing that stands out to me is the color. Red seems to be at the forefront and commands my attention, almost as much as the violence in this episode. I'm not joking, this one is probably the most gruesome of the series. Number 6. The Princess and the Bounty Hunters. Samurai Jack is a show of long, extended moments that lead to massive, exciting payoffs, and this episode is the perfect example of that. We are introduced to a colorful collection of legendary bounty hunters, assassins who are the masters of their craft and are world-renowned. They have all gathered to claim their bounty on Jack. Each bounty hunter is unique with their own design and character traits. They tell the others why they are the best and will have no trouble taking down Samurai Jack. Eventually, they decide to combine their strength and team up. If they work together, there is no way that they could fail, right? The trap is set and the silence begins. The reason why I love this episode so much is the ending for it. It has such a huge payoff, one that is built up throughout the entire episode. I know that I said there would be spoilers in this video, but I want to avoid telling you the conclusion of this particular one. Trust me, it's worth seeing for yourself. Number 5. Jack and the Hunters. I have already mentioned that Jack isn't invincible and has had trouble defeating opponents before, but has he ever actually lost? A big reason why people aren't interested in Superman is because of how overpowered he is. For Jack, that isn't the case. He is strong, but not unstoppable. Jack finds himself face to face with the most deadly hunters in the galaxy. These Serengeti predators live for the hunt, and Aku employed them for that very reason. He knew that Jack would be their ultimate prey. After a daring chase, Jack is captured and actually defeated. These guys were just too much for him. Aku shows up to take away the samurai, but is told that he can't have Jack. The hunters respect him too much and refuse to give him up. This episode is refreshing because it shows that Jack isn't perfect and can still lose, that he can improve and become a better fighter. Number 4. Aku's Fairytales. The choices on this list so far have had quite the serious tone about them, where Jack battles and fights his way out of danger. The show isn't just action though, and has a good amount of comedy in it too. And this episode? Oh my god, it's ridiculous. So Aku is pissed that the kids of this world no longer fear or respect him. Instead, they like Jack. and Aku wants to change that. So what does he do? He gathers up all the kids into a creepy stadium and tells them stories about himself to convince them of how wonderful he is. Aku basically rips off Samurai Jack's story and retells it as his own. That Aku is the hero who stopped the bad guy and turned him into One thing I love about this episode is how out of touch Aku is with the kids. They are terrified of him at first, but eventually catch on and figure out that he is an idiot. Their faces when they first arrive, and their faces when they realize Aku is full of shit. There are a few comedy episodes in Samurai Jack, but this was the first, and, in my opinion, the best. Up to this point, we have seen Aku as an evil tyrant, but now we get to see the funny side of him. The one that is hilariously ignorant. Number 3. Jack and the Scotsman 2. Besides Aku and Jack, we don't get to see many recurring characters in this show, but there is one big, loud exception. The Scotsman. When Jack and the Scotsman first met, they hated each other and actually had a battle. They eventually had to unite though and fought off some bad guys together. Now they are good friends and occasionally bump into each other. Out of all the episodes that feature the Scotsman, the second one is my favorite. The poor guy's wife was kidnapped by some monsters and will be eaten unless Jack and him can stop them. Throughout the entire episode, we hear the Scotsman tell Jack about how lovely his wife is. You would think that this lady is the definition of beauty, but then you meet her. And yet the Scotsman is still totally in love. It's pathetic, but cute. Jack and the Scotsman have to fight off the monsters and find themselves completely outnumbered. Things are looking bad, but then the main villain makes a mistake. I see why the Scotsman loves her so much now. This lady kicks ass. This episode has action, comedy, and character development. Jack doesn't have many friends, so it's good to see these two together kicking ass. Number 2. Jack and Aku are the two primary characters of the show. Their objective is to destroy one another, and we get to see them occasionally battle throughout the series. The fights are typically short though, and happen at the end of an episode. But in this one, it is the episode. So Aku is fed up with his crappy bounty hunters. So what does he do? He decides to take things into his own hands. This leads to the best interaction in the entire show. Aku challenges Jack to a duel, but with a catch. Aku cannot use his powers, but Jack cannot use his sword. They both agree and have an epic fight with some funny dialogue. At the end, Aku deceives Jack and steals his sword. But then Jack tricks Aku and tells him it's a fake sword. But then Aku finds the real sword. Or so he thought. Apparently Jack hid fake swords everywhere for just such an occasion. They fight and Aku runs away. Same old, same old. And number 1, my favorite episode of Samurai Jack is Jack and the Traveling Creatures. This episode is actually quite slow. It starts with Jack trying to find his way to a sacred portal. He receives help from multiple ancient creatures along the way. They view him as some kind of chosen one. Jack finally arrives at the time portal, one with no strings attached. The only issue is the guardian who stands in the way.
I humbly request your permission to use this great power.
Nope.
In a way, this is basically the final boss before Aku. Jack just needs to beat this guy and go back home.
I told you, man. It ain't gonna happen. Now why don't you leave before you really get hurt?
Never! I must return to the past.
Despite Jack's best efforts, he is defeated and almost killed, but the portal itself intervenes. It tells the Guardian to let Jack live. We are then told that there is more to this story.
Not yet. Not yet.
This is the only episode that gives us a possible glimpse of what is to come. That Jack isn't ready to go back yet and needs more time. The show was canceled in 2004, so we were never able to see what would happen. But according to the season 5 trailer, it has been 50 years since Jack arrived to the past, and the Jack we saw in the portal looks a whole lot like the one we see in season 5. Perhaps it is time for this samurai to meet the Guardian again, defeat him in battle, and finally return to the past so he can undo the evil of a coup. That, my friends, is why this episode is my favorite, because it gave me hope that Samurai Jack would return. And so it has. I guess we just have to patiently wait and see what season 5 has in store.